Welcome to Millennials Are Killing Capitalism. In this episode, members of the Kenya Organic Intellectuals Network return to the podcast. Folks will recall that we had a conversation with them last year on their book, Breaking the Silence on NGOs in Africa. If you haven't listened to that, I highly recommend it. This conversation started thinking about the situation in Haiti. We previously had a discussion with Dr. Jemima Pierre on the current situation and the Western-backed invasion of Haiti, for which Kenya is sending police. But also, I was interested in how the struggle in Palestine was being received in Kenya at both a governmental level and among the masses. Along those lines, often Sudan, Congo, and Haiti are raised up as other examples of genocide, of imperialism, of proxy wars, and terrible violence and humanitarian catastrophes as people seek to expand our analysis of what's happening in Palestine beyond that individual conflict. I wanted to get their perspectives on all of these situations as folks who organize from a Pan African Scientific Socialist perspective from the Kenyan context. Just a note that May 25th is African Liberation Day, and we hosted a conversation yesterday with the All-African People's Revolutionary Party on our YouTube channel. Links to all the discussions referenced will be in the show notes. Our guests are Louis Maganga, Gasheke Gashihi, Okaka Oyango, and Wanjiru Wanjira. Louis Maganga is a member of the Organic Intellectuals Network and an organizer with the Revolutionary Socialist League based in Kenya. Gasheke Gashihi is the coordinator of the Mathare Social Justice Center and a member of the Organic Intellectuals Network. Okaka Onyango is a member of the Revolutionary Socialist League, Organic Intellectuals Network, and Social Justice Movement. He is a dedicated tech-driven community organizer, blending roles of revolutionary intellectualism and communication strategist. Wanjiru Wanjira is a social justice advocate and activist with a decade of experience as a grassroots human rights defender. She is co-founder of the Mathare Social Justice Center and coordinator of Matagari Kids Book Club, where children learn about Pan-African history. She is a writer with the Kenyan Organic Intellectuals Network and co-host of Liberating Minds podcast, a history channel on YouTube. She is also working with the African Social Justice Network team in South Africa and Zambia. We recorded this conversation on March 28th. A month later, on April 25th, massive floods hit Mathare. We've included a YouTube video of Wanjira discussing the floods. There was also a mass arrest of human rights defenders at the Mathare Social Justice Center. We encourage folks to reach out to these comrades and to the Mathare Social Justice Center to see if there are ways that we can provide support. And I would just note that obviously this discussion, we focus very much on struggles elsewhere, but it's very important to connect and look for ways to support these comrades in their struggles as well. All right, so comrades from the Organic Intellectuals Network, it's great to be back in conversation with you. Obviously, last year we had the conversation with you on Breaking the Silence on NGOs in Africa, which I really encourage people to listen to if they haven't already. It's a great conversation. Obviously, there's been a number of major historical and geopolitical events since we last spoke in June. One of the reasons I reached out was I wanted to get some thoughts from you all on the intervention in Haiti. Given the role of the Kenyan government as a key participant in that, obviously it is a U.S. core group-backed project. And then, of course, we cannot talk about the world today without discussing the genocide occurring in Palestine as well, which is all on our hearts and our minds. But there are other major events that we will get into in the course of the conversation. Do want to take some time, to talk about Congo, to talk about Sudan, and to talk about dynamics within Kenya. But to start, can you describe the general attitude of the people of Kenya today regarding the situations in Palestine and Haiti?
Yes, thank you very much, Jared, for the question. Once again, we're very grateful to be back here on this platform after, of course, the session that we held last year that was released in June. So we're very grateful to be having this conversation once again. As regards the general attitudes of the people of Kenya regarding the question of Palestine and Haiti, well, starting with Haiti, the first time that Kenyans got the news that the government of Kenya was planning to send 1,000 police officers to Haiti, the reaction that the Kenyan people had was concern. That was the first reaction. People were concerned. And people were concerned because they had several questions. The first question was, of course, do the Kenyan police have what legally is required, or do they have the jurisdiction to operate outside the Kenyan borders as per the Constitution of Kenya, as per the laws of Kenya? So that was the first concern. How can Kenya deploy police officers, its people who are tasked with working within our own boundaries? How can Kenya deploy these to work outside the boundaries of Kenya? That was the first concern. But also the second concern was, what is this, or what are these interests that have made the government of Kenya send these troops to Haiti? Is this something that the people of Haiti themselves have been involved in? Is this decision something that they themselves have said? Did the people of Haiti themselves say, Kenya, please come and help us, tackle this situation, this security situation here? Or is the government of Kenya doing this in order to simply comply with directives or with requests that have been made by the Western countries, of course, led by the United States? So there's also concern if the police of Kenya will be capable of dealing with this situation. A situation, of course, which they do not fully understand, a situation which, of course, has certain interests behind it, which really the people of Kenya are not part of. So that was the initial reaction. So in general, what the people feel is that they do not support this deployment of the police of Kenya to Haiti, because they feel it goes against what the people want for this situation, or rather what the people of Kenya want as regards the proper handling of this situation in Haiti, but also because Kenyans simply do not want to be engaged in something that they do not fully understand, to be engaged in something which really has other interests behind it. So as regards that, of course, in the course of this conversation, comrades are going to talk about the various ways which the people of Kenya have tried to stop this deployment of police officers, the various ways they've tried to say this cannot happen. That, of course, is going to be mentioned in the course of this conversation. But really, that is the general attitude as regards the Haiti situation in Kenya. As regards the question of Palestine, well, the fact is, for a long time, the people of Kenya have been subjected to continuous rhetoric and propaganda championed by the evangelical churches. Now, it's important to understand that Kenya, like many other countries in the world, which have a huge Christian population, have had evangelical churches working closely with Israel to promote, of course, the narrative that Israel tries to promote, so that this situation in Palestine gets to be viewed as more of a religious issue rather than a political issue. So for a very long time, that's the conception, or that's the perception that the people of Kenya have had. And of course, this has been championed by the evangelical churches under the influence, of course, of Israel in trying, of course, to influence public opinion on the matter. However, things have been changing recently over the past few years as a result of the agitation of movements such as ours, which have continuously, talked about the solidarity, our solidarity with the people of Palestine, and also as a result of social media, which enables people to interact with news independently. Now you don't have to rely on mainstream media to tell you what's happening in Israel or in any other part of the world. So because of these factors, it's becoming increasingly clear what's really going on in Palestine. For the people of Kenya, it's becoming increasingly clear that it's a genocide taking place. The whole question of settler occupation, the whole question of segregation, the whole question of imperialism within Palestine, within occupied Palestine, has become increasingly clear to the people of Kenya for the past few years. And I'd say that is progress. Of course, still a lot of work has to be done because we're working against, of course, this narrative that the evangelical churches have continued to preach, of course, under the influence of Israel. So still work has to be done. But there is progress, especially after October 7th. Many people, even those who previously fell under the spell of this narrative that had been peddled around, even they have begun to see that what is happening is not what they thought was happening. So the narrative as regards Palestine is shifting in favor of the people of Palestine in Kenya, but of course, still there is work to be done. Thank you.
You brought up that the government of Kenya has expressed support for Israel openly, as evidenced by the statement issued by President Ruto after October 7th, as well as the statement presented by Kenya on behalf of the UN Security Council. Has this been a consistent stand taken by Kenya on this question throughout its history since independence? What would you say is the reason behind the government of Kenya holding this position? What factors influence this, and what are the interests behind it?
Now, the history of Kenya, as a question to ask, has been a history of a neo-colonial state since independence. After betrayal of the flag independence, Kenya did not even support South African liberation struggle. They supported the apartheid during Jomo Kenyatta presidency because our has been a negotiated flag independence, the betrayal of Mau Mau, and formation of a neo-colonial state. Kenya is a former British colony, so it has continued to follow that line of being an appendage of imperialism. And even the Israel and the British wanted to create a colonial settlement in Kenya. So Kenya is a client state of imperialism, and that's why they have continued with that line. So there's no difference between William Ruto and Jomo Kenyatta and Daniel Moi, who created the second president, who created the dictatorship, and even Mwai Kibaki and Uhuru Kenyatta. All of them, they are answerable to these imperialist forces. Israel continued to train our security agencies, which they are implicated in human rights violations, and every security agencies in Kenya is like a badge of honor when you get invited by Israel security agencies to be trained. So you can see the connection now, complicit with the Kenya client state with the imperialism forces in East Africa. That's why when William Ruto went to United Nations, he continued to answer to the interest of the imperialism, and that's why when the U.S. asked for Kenya to take police to Haiti, William Ruto was very willing by being peanut clubs that falling the table. Yeah, that's the history of the Kenya client state.
Thank you. Another thing that you all alerted me to is that Israel has been putting a lot of effort into influencing public policy in Kenya regarding the question of Palestine, including lobbying legislators to influence foreign policy and using evangelical churches to influence public opinion. Why do you think they do this, and how has it been successful in Kenya?
Why has this continued happening in Kenya? It's also because Kenya economy is still in the hands of the imperialist forces, the British colonialism, the white settlers. The economy has remained to be in their hands. So that's why it is very easy for the ruling LITA in Kenya to compromise. Whether it is sending soldiers in Haiti, whether it is creating Kenyans military bases for the US, for the UK, British imperialism, which they still have a base in Kenya, in Nyanyuki here. They have been also involved in the human rights violations. And that's why the struggles of stopping sending of the Kenya police to Haiti is an international question, is a campaign that should acquire an international character, because all these imperialist forces and armies are based here in Kenya, most of them. Like we have a military base here for the British government, and where it's based in Nyanyuki. So it is connected. And in 1999, there was Ocalan, who was the leader of the Kurdish movement, was kidnapped here in Kenya. And it was an international conspiracy between the Israel, the Turkish agents and the U.S. intelligence forces, which captured here a liberator for Kurdish people here in Kenyan soil. So you can see the connection of these international forces in Kenya. That's why Kenya is a backyard of imperialism. We have big offices for UN here. We have all the forces that rule the world here in Kenya, and they use Kenya as a space to go and exploit Congo, to go and exploit East African region. Here is the best place where you can get the best hotel, the best banks, industry for capitalism. So this is a space that they really like to use to go and exploit other East African country. After here, they can be able to go and exploit Congo. After here, they can go to Rwanda, they can go to Uganda. They can plan how to plunder the natural resources of East African region. This is why Kenya has remained as a client state of imperialism. And connecting with this, that's why our president is so willing to bend to the interest of the imperialism and send the police to Haiti. And this is very horrible because Haiti has a great history as a freedom fighter. They inspired the Latin American struggle for slavery, the Jacobin. They inspire Venezuela, the Simon Bolivar. So Haiti has a powerful history that is only people who are a client state of imperialism will not understand the role Haiti has played in the liberation struggle and liberation of and creating a Pan-African path that planted the seeds of African liberation movement in early 40s and 50 that brought ourselves flag independent. And this institution is a wake-up call for us, Pan-African social movement in Caribbean and Africa, to unify our forces to continue fighting against this imperialism.
Yeah, thank you. So how are you and others combating these things on the ground in Kenya? Talk to us about any efforts you are involved in to raise public consciousness regarding the question of Palestine and to express solidarity with the people of Palestine, and share any progress you see in those efforts.
We've been having joint campaigns, and with the joint campaigns, I've also been able to kind of spearhead a revolutionary movement where all organizations which are revolutionary in Kenya and the diaspora have been able to breathe life into. It's called Pan African Socialist Alliance. And Pan African Socialist Alliance, PASA, has been doing ideological seminars on the issues around Palestine, Sudan, Congo, and the Haiti question. And this actually points to some of the actions that have been spearheaded by us coming together as the left in Kenya to kind of raise awareness around issues of war, imperialism, and capitalism. The other thing also has been the creation of the Pan-African Solidarity Action Networks, which for most of the leftists in Kenya here know has been in the front line in terms of looking for donations, sending for donations and humanitarian aid to intervene in the atrocities that are taking place in Sudan. So these are have been some of the initiatives that we've been dedicating ourselves to. And we've been having also pickup points where people can actually drop things like toiletries, clothes, food, and cereals, so that they can be shipped to the most affected areas in Sudan and assist the people there who are caught in between the two rivaling armies. So we have a Pan-African Solidarity Action Program which actually looks into that. Some of these donations can be dropped in some of our centers here, like Kayole Community Center, Ukombozi Library, which is at the center of the CBD. They have some networks also, I think one in Uganda and in Tanzania, and another organization in Mombasa. Another action that we've also been having is been releasing statements condemning imperialist crimes and the polarization of democracies in the global south. Other actions also be able to do is also host candlelight vigils for the innocent lives claimed by the imperialist wars and capitalist projects that we continue to see ravaging our lives every day. Like, for example, the issue, of course, we can't get time to speak enough about the issue on Palestine. More than 30,000 killed and most of them babies and women. So we try to have kind of like vigils to kind of memorize and commemorate some of those innocent lives lost, and kind of also use these as platforms to push for ceasefires, for actions that can actually be escalated to even that it's say the criminal courts of justice, international criminal courts of justice. And the other point of action we've also been doing will be on doing murals and arts. And what this actually has been be able to achieve is actually to raise the class consciousness of the communities where we organize, to better understand the conflicts that take place not only in Africa but also globally. So we have had art on Free Palestine. We have had arts on the atrocities that are being committed by NATO. We have had art on AFRICOM, which is the Africa Command, Africa Command being spearheaded by the US and has its headquarters in Germany. So what AFRICOM does is actually they're very integral and key in terms of organizing coups that are pro-imperialist and subverting democracies that are, that are actually pro-people and anti-colonial and all that which is oppressive. So the murals go a long way in actually telling our stories, and we found it very effective because they hang around for long periods of time and people are able to sit around, discuss, and eventually we see it gaining more traction and momentum since more murals are being set up and being put up around the country, carrying messages of solidarity and also condemning the acts of capitalism, especially with regards to oppression to the global south. The other thing would be that we've also been able to get more platforms to share experience. Of course, like what even now this platform is doing for us, Millennials Against Capitalism. So we get our voices being heard, and we appreciate these platforms because with the pro-establishment media that are there, they really don't support alternative voices that speak up against the oppressive regimes and acts of violence by minority settler groups on indigenous people around the world. So when you get more platforms like these where we share experiences, it kind of becomes liberating in itself, being that we are able to see how even some of our issues are interconnected with regards to the expansion of the global capitalism. And also got to mention earlier that we also use revolutionary intellectualism to spotlight some of the issues and experiences that we get in the global south. And that has been a critical role being played by the Organic Intellectuals Network, which has a lot of grassroots community organizers who are able to come out and speak about the atrocities that they see in the communities and the best alternatives to the kind of systems that we have in place at the moment.
Yeah, thank you. Recently, the government of Kenya agreed to send 1,000 police officers to Haiti to, quote, help address the security situation there. This action, which we understand that U.S. imperialism and other Western governments like Canada and France are behind, is something that we've done some programming around, most notably our discussion last year with Dr. Jemima Pierre of Black Alliance for Peace. What do you think influenced this decision by the Kenyan government?
Thank you very much for this question on Haiti. I think that Kenya agreed to send 1,000 of its soldiers to Haiti because of the money that President Ruto has been offered by the US, $237 million, if Kenya agrees to lead actually this peacekeeping mission. Canada, Brazil, Mexico had also been approached to take a lead in this multinational mission, but they declined. So Kenya, and I think it's being used very strategically because of the blackface that it brings. So it looks like a harmless peace mission between brothers who are working together to restore Haiti and strengthen it. But this could not be further from the truth. Dr. Jemima clearly says that Haiti does not have a gun problem. Haiti has a U.S. imperialism problem. And this is very clear from what happened in 2004 when there was a coup in Haiti that saw their president, Jean Bertrand Aristide, taken from power. And the U.S., together with other foreign governments, and institutions formed this core group that has been making decisions about Haiti ever since. This core group has no representation from Haiti. It is not accountable to the people of Haiti. We can only speculate that they have foreign economic and political interest in Haiti, which is to continue to sabotage the progress that Haiti should be making. Because if you look at the composition of this core group, it has people who have been very heavily invested in Haiti before, a country like Spain, France, and the US, who are all former colonizers of Haiti, are in this core group. France, for example, when Haiti got independence from them, they put up economic measures that continue to have Haiti underdeveloped. They put up double taxation, like Haiti had to take a debt to repay the debt that it owed France. And you would think that for colonialism, what is needed the most is reparations. Like here in Kenya, we are asking for reparations from the British, but the French ask that Haiti pays them. And we can also see this happens with France in West Africa. But today, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger are standing up to the bully that French imperialism is in West Africa and actually asking them to leave so they can develop, So what has happened in Haiti is the work of imperialism across the board to keep the people subjugated, to keep the people suffering, to keep the people in constant chaos, so we can always have this excuse of invasion. Also, we as Kenyans are asking ourselves, is there another way we can be of service to the people of Haiti apart from invasion? In fact, there's growing concern among the Kenyan people now that the Prime Minister, Henry Ariel, who resigned from Haiti, the situation is now more dire than it was. 80% of gangs have come together and there's more violence than there was before the Prime Minister resigned. And we're asking if this is the time to send our soldiers who are not as equipped as the gangs are in Haiti. It just feels like a very bad decision for the president to make, but he's hell-bent on making it despite the general feeling of many Kenyans, the general feeling of even the soldiers themselves who are going to Haiti. Some of them have stepped down. We are reading reports about thousands of soldiers in Haiti leaving their posts because they fear for their safety. So we think that there must be a better way to be in solidarity with Haiti. And actually, we can see that the action of our government is false Pan-Africanism. That state Pan-Africanism, where just heads of state come together and say, this is Pan-Africanism, we are African states. But we are pushing for people-centered Pan-Africanism, that we people of Kenya stand in solidarity with the people of Haiti, will hold demonstrations calling off the decision to send our people to Haiti to try and bring peace. It just sounds very mission impossible, really, because even here in our country, we have violence in the northern part of Kenya, bandits that the government has been unable to deal with. So when we see our president very boldly stating that we shall lead the peace mission in Haiti, we are very sure that there's something behind this face of Pan-Africanism that Ruto has been putting up. And I think by now, everybody around the globe knows that he's a false Pan-Africanist. He's a global puppet of neocolonialism and imperialism in Africa. And it's just sad that he would paint our country in that light. But he's not a reflection of the Kenyan people. And we want to make it very clear that Kenyan people send their solidarity to the people of Haiti. And we believe that strengthening Haiti from inside, strengthening the institutions of Haiti, working with the Montaro Accord, for example, that has brought the different actors within Haiti, the civil society, the Catholic Church, the different players within the society in Haiti to try and consolidate their nation, is where a lot of support should be going to, a lot of solidarity should be going to. The problem of Haiti cannot be solved by further invasion. It can only be solved by internal efforts to rebuild and consolidate and bring back Haiti. So other than the money aspect that the president is being given, and also positioning himself as the perfect imperialist stooge, those are the major interests that we can see Kenyan government has had in sending soldiers to Haiti. The other thing might be political deals that we are not privy to, that are classified information. For example, when Prime Minister of Haiti, Ariel, came to Kenya to seal the deal because the High Court rules that it will be illegal to send police to Haiti because there's no reciprocal action Kenya will be getting from Haiti. And so Henry came to clear those illegal reasons that the High Court had highlighted, but we do not know what kind of deal he was coming to make with President Ruto. We are speculating it could be with the uranium that is in Haiti. Haiti has the second largest reserves of this very precious mineral, 3 times more precious than gold. And in this era of technology, it has a lot of technological advantages because of the hard temperatures it requires to melt and its resistance to corrosion. So it could be able to make things like heat resistance spaceships. It's highly technological, and it's highly valuable. So we do not know if Haiti is also experiencing all of this external intervention because of this precious mineral that it has. We also know that it was the first Black country to declare its independence and to fight for its independence. And there's a lot of speculation that it is being punished for this. We, the global Black community, send all our solidarity to Haiti. We condemn the invasion of Haiti by the U.S. imperialist forces and by the UN, because this peace mission is actually backed by the United Nations Security Council. So we can also see the myth of the UN peacekeepers, the UN, the US also positioning itself as the moral police of the world. We can also see what is happening in Palestine and the role the US is playing there. We can also see what is happening in Congo and the role of imperialism and neocolonialism there. And we condemn all of these actions and actually call for a reorganization of the United Nations to a people-centered, united body that actually works for the progression, for the advancement of the humans, the human beings, of the person. It was Mwalimu Julius Nyerere that said development must be development of the people of Haiti, development of the people of Palestine, development of the people of Congo, of the people of Sudan, development of the people-centered actions towards peace, towards security, and towards unity.
Thank you. Are there efforts in Kenya to challenge and stop the deployment of police officers to Haiti? Has there been any progress made regarding this?
We have had efforts to stop the deployment of Kenyan officers, Kenyan soldiers to Haiti. There's one event we held called Hands of Haiti event, which was meant to highlight what is going on in Haiti, to have for Kenyans to have a clearer understanding of what exactly is going on in Haiti and the role of U.S. imperialism and the neo-colonial role that Kenya will be playing if we accept our soldiers to be sent to Haiti. We also have one of the opposition leaders here file a petition challenging the decision by the Kenyan government to send soldiers to Haiti, which had its final ruling in January, and the court ruled that it is illegal to send our soldiers to Haiti. Most of us were pleasantly surprised by this decision by the Kenyan High Court. Why we were surprised is because the judiciary had approved the unpopular finance bill that the Ruto government introduced once they came into power. 98% of Kenyans were against this bill. It was retrogressive and it was unacceptable, really, for the majority of Kenyans. But the High Court did not listen to the people, and they ruled in favor of the government, signing the finance bill into law. So also on the Haiti issue, people were already not very sure of this judiciary, but we were pleasantly surprised that, and actually very happy that they ruled in favor of Haiti and on the side of the majority of the Kenyan people.
All right, so having touched on the questions of Palestine and of Haiti, what deductions can we make regarding Kenya and its place in the maintenance of global imperialism? How deep are the ties between Kenya and Israel during the post-colonial period, and what role has Israel played in neo-colonial Kenya? Similarly, what has been the relationship between the U.S. and Kenya, and how have we seen the U.S. use Kenya to maintain imperialism in Africa?
Yes. First, we have to agree that Kenya has been one of Israel's greatest ally in Africa. And what we can actually term a mutually beneficial relationship has a lot of historical ties with regards to the sharing of military experience and technology by Israel. This kind of cooperation can be dated even way back to the 70s and 80s, when we saw on the crackdown that were being taken by the dictatorship regime of Moi in trying to stifle dissent, and they used some of the tactics that were gained from Israel in trying to stifle Palestinians. So we can draw similarities to some of these tactics even today. Like, for example, the use of force and harmful but ordinances like the tear gas. So with our experiences that some of these ordinances being used especially to disperse people when they're protesting against the state, must mean that we've seen people actually dying from inhaling some of these toxic tear gases, women miscarrying out of just inhaling these fumes, these dangerous fumes. And it doesn't stop there. We also see the constant militarization of the police force, of course, with the aid and the mentorship of Israel. And a good example would be the Reke Squad, which is a special unit squad inside the General Service Unit, which is a paramilitary group dreaded for breaking up protests against the authoritarian state. So they receive a lot of aid from Israel in terms of training, surveillance, also healthcare and agriculture, and militarizing the police force. So these are some of the military and technology cooperations that Kenya receives from Israel. And on the other end of the stick is that Kenya kind of sanitizes the apartheid state of Israel through the evangelical churches, with the misinformation and disinformation of the Jewish question and how Israel came to actually occupy Palestine. So these are some of the things that we see Israel playing a major role in terms of collaborating with other imperialist nations like the USA to actually make Kenya their foster child in the global war against terrorism. So what we see in instances where Israel or maybe the imperialist nations don't want to have their fingers fixed in issues that would be murky and would actually draw a lot of protest with regards on how they handle this kind of situations, they draw up their proxies to actually fight for them. They pay them a great amount of money and militarize them by giving them uniforms, special trainings and tools of violence so that they can represent them on the ground and, of course, be able to avert blames that may be directed to them. So we see proxy nations like Kenya, which is a puppet regime, they're being sent to places like Congo in the pretext of going to bring peace. In some instances, in places like Somalia, we've seen our foot soldiers being there saying that they are battling war on terror. We've also had discussions which have been very heated and contested on the issue around Haiti. So these are some of the instances that we can draw upon on how actually Israel has been playing a crucial role in actually exporting violence to other democracies, especially in the developing economies of the global south. And what we understand is that even with regards to some of these technologies have been very harmful and dangerous, even to activists like us who have been a target of eavesdropping and, being being followed and targeted by the state by use of some of these surveillance kits being provided by the Israeli government. Earlier, I had indicated that Kenya is a clan state of imperialism, and this has been enabled with the political elite who actually occupy the top and plumb positions in power, and they look actually to maintain the legitimacy by quoting imperialist powers to do their bidding, most of the time, like supplying them with weapons to stifle dissent and the likes. So over the recent past, we've been able to see how diplomatically Kenya has been kind of quoting imperialist states. Just to give an example on what actually happened when in the late 80s, actually, where during the height of the apartheid and the liberation struggle in South Africa, when African states were very categorical that they are never recognizing the brutal dictatorship of the settler colonial regime in South Africa, Kenya actually recognized the government that was there then of William de Klerk, and even he got to visit Kenya in an official capacity in June 1991, which was later reciprocated by our head of state, who was the dictator then, called Daniel Teacher Arap Moi. And that was actually the first visit by a sitting head of state to kind of rubber stamp the racist regime on African soil. So flash forward to recently when we saw the current sitting president, William Ruto, also going ahead to rebuke Hamas and call them a terrorist organization. Well, in the same breath, forgetting that we ourselves went through the same kind of atrocities not so long ago, like added 60 years, we had like 10 years state of emergency, and the Kenya Land and Freedom Army was also categorized as a terrorist group when we were actually fighting for the total emancipation of the African peoples in the Kenyan soil. So we see that there is a brutal intent by the Kenyan elite to continue being loyal lieutenants of imperialism. Yes.
Thank you. Can you give a general description of the current situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo? What is your analysis on the situation, and how does this concern the rest of the world, and what do you think should be done regarding this?
The history of Congo is the history of betrayal. Since the assassination of Patrice Lumumba in 1965, this has continued to be a space where the imperialism has continued to exploit Congo. Today, millions of Congos have died during a war that has been created by imperialism in the plunder of natural resources. As they say, there is no mobile phone that is made in the world without having some mineral from Congo. And that's how the wealth of Congo has been used in the world by imperialism forces to continue dominating the world, using the blood diamond and blood copper, all minerals in Congo. Congo is very important in the world, and as we campaign against the genocide that's happening in Palestine, the same thing, genocide is happening in Congo. In the last almost 25 years since its overthrow of dictator Mobutu, Congo has never been allowed to create a democratic state. Recently, as a social justice center, we did a campaign against the killings in Congo. We have launched a campaign with Madara Social Justice Center and social movements in Africa to try and create and highlight the situation in Congo. As a Pan-Africanist, we believe that we need to build a united front around issues that are affecting a majority of the African people, and especially in Eastern Congo, where client states like Rwanda, Uganda have continued to be used by imperialists to destabilize Eastern Congo and never allow a democratic state to take root in Congo. So Congo is very important, and is very important for our struggle, because it is through Congo that if we can be able to build a formidable social working class forces that can be able to create an alternative voice to liberate Africa. Because Congo is a country that is largest in Africa. It has major resources. It still has a freshwater lake, a freshwater forest. And this is an appetite that capitalism and imperialism have continued to make sure that Congo will never be stable. as long as they continue to exploit Congo and continue to divide Africa and using a country like Rwanda, Uganda as a client state, which has made East Africa to remain a very fragile region where it is very difficult to have an independent democratic state that believe in social justice and believe to support the people's aspiration. So that's why Congo is very important, and its struggle is linked all over with the struggling masses, as symbolized by the assassination of Patrice Lumumba as a martyr. It reminds us that the struggle for our liberation is still in our hands, and that's why Congo is very important. Madara Social Justice Center have said we have launched a campaign to demand a stop of genocide in Congo. I'll share some of these photos and statements that we have done, so that also comrades can understand that this is the kind of the solidarity we are looking from them. Another comrade solidarity we are seeking to social movement, especially in a global south, is a multinational company like Del Monte that is exploiting our people, killing our people because of pineapples. There are big, huge multinational company here in Kenya that are doing production of large-scale fruits, like it's happening in Latin America. This kind of campaign that we need to connect. The other campaign that is very key, that I think social movement in America and global north is about Congo. If we can continue to campaign against this and a multinational company that have continued to exploit and undermine the struggles of Pan-African social movement, we should connect our struggle and shame them and campaign them. As the US and Europe is a big market for this multinational company. They continue to make profit and they continue to exploit resources in Africa and undermine democratic struggles of African people. So I think our connection with the social movement in Latin America, in global north, is to link our struggle, the struggle of working class masses, and also give each other solidarity so that we can continue fighting and claiming our humanity. Yeah. So that's why it's very important for the struggle in Congo, which is connected with our struggle here in Kenya against police brutality, extrajudicial killing, and this is connected with the same Palestinian struggle, where Israel and the US has used their technology of security, the technology of growth of their digital tech companies to continue spying and exploiting our resources and destabilize the region.
Yeah, thank you. All right, let's talk about Sudan a little bit. So can you give a description of what do you see going on in Sudan currently, your analysis of it? How does this concern the rest of the world, and what do you think should be done here?
I'd like to tackle the question in bits. The first will be on the general situation as it is in Sudan. And first thing first is that there's little news that is coming out of Sudan, being that the two warring factions try to incessantly kind of keep off any information coming out of the Sudan conflict. And what we understand is that the war is really grave as it is. We can actually kind of confirm more than 16,000 deaths since the war began 2 years ago. Should be 2-3 years ago. And we can actually report like 5 million people have been displaced and in dire need of humanitarian aid. So even as we speak right now, there's little that is going in terms of humanitarian aid to those affected by the conflict. So there are multiple refugees in various countries, especially Chad. And we've been kind of trying to use some of our networks to try and support some of the grassroots movements around these areas to see how we can actually kind of send any form of aid to those who are very much affected by the war. So my analysis on the Sudan civil war is that it's not pro-people. We're seeing two generals fighting over the control of the country, but not actually to kind of liberate the people from the oppression that they're experiencing. And it's not something new that we're witnessing in Sudan. From time and again, we've seen these reactionary elements coming up to kind of thwart the advance of the masses who are trying to defeat the enemies and come up with the socialist revolution and the reactionary forces come actually and align themselves as wanting to actually help the people. Like in this case, when we saw the resistance committees actually organizing and being able to rise up against a dictator who was the former president al-Bashir, the army came at the aid of the masses, like they were together with them, but in the process they thwarted the momentum, and they, through the support of some hidden hands, some neo-colonial powers, they were able to kind of muzzle the masses and then engage in this very long war, of course, with the RSF, who are also being funded with these same hidden hands. And when we talk about the hidden hands, I actually refer to the neo-colonial powers that are actually looking over to take the vast mineral resources like the gold that is in Sudan. One of them, of course, being Israel. The other countries, of course, being UAE and Dubai, where some of this gold and precious metals are actually shuttled to and then get sold in the black market. So what we are witnessing is something that follows the same script that we continue to see every time when the masses rise up against a dictatorship or economic hardship, tried and bring a socialist revolution, but then it gets thwarted right in the middle, and we get people who place themselves in front of these protests, in front of these demonstrations, and actually kill it to kind of sustain their bourgeois democracies. So for me, what I actually pick up from this is that we need to continuously support some of these grassroots movements like the resistance committees, which actually led to the revolution against al-Bashir. And they are still very much active in trying to assist and help the people who are affected by the war. Like I just said the other time, the numbers now totaling to around 5 million refugees who are in dire need of humanitarian aid and medical assistance. So we see the neocolonial powers supporting these armies, the RSF and the Sudanese armed forces. And what these two forces do in turn is that they exploit the African masses. So amidst this all turmoil, amidst all this infighting, a lot of minerals is being stolen from Sudan. And not only that, but many other things are not going well in terms of development. And, some of these wars out, it actually kind of affects not only the economic aspect of the country, but also the social and the political. So we are seeing there's a lot of growing awareness in the Sudanese people, even as much as there's that total shutdown in terms of internet and news being broadcasted on the conflict as it is. But we are seeing a lot of activists and collaborators who are actually very much passionate to, to assist those who are affected using social media to seek for safer evacuation routes and see how to, provide medical supplies to some of these groups. And through this political awareness, what you are kind of picking up from the discussions that are going on, especially when you have some of these activists with us online, is that there's a lot of activities that are going on in terms of, I wouldn't say the people fighting the RSF, but in terms of agitating for much more better ways of dealing with this same conflict. So people are against this reactionary bourgeois, I'd say kind of a coup against the people. But the problem is that it is the armies that reserve the tool of violence as it is right now. And they're basically controlling everything in terms of the main routes on how food gets to some of these areas that are affected by the conflict. And the only kind of, I'd say, even much more worse kind of a situation is that the army is being supported by these hidden hands that actually want to thwart the socialist revolution that's taking place in Sudan. Other than that is that we are hopeful that as time goes by, the current crisis and the conflicts going on around the world is that the war in Sudan will soon end, and we'll get to actually be able to connect and link with our comrades and see how best we can be able to assist them in terms of overcoming some of these atrocities that we face right now, being that it looks like it's a forever war, and the only time that this war can actually kind of die down is when either of the two parties fires the last bullet from the chamber, which looks like it's something that is inevitable, that will never end. But hopefully, we hope that very soon peace will come to Sudan. This actually affects the world, and why they should be concerned about this. It's very simple. Where's the humanity? Where's the humanity? You know, these wars have been going for the longest, and I believe like Sudan, they've never really had a peaceful time where they actually sat down and enjoyed their democratic gains. Every time they've always had coups, you see, and this is something that to ponder about in terms of how do you claim that you're free when the Sudanese people are not free? So for me, it just boils down to humanity, and actually being in a position also to call out the hidden hands, the neocolonial powers that are actually supplying arms and tools of violence to the Sudanese armed forces and the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces. It's not humane to sit down and see children being maimed, women being raped, fathers and sons losing their lives in a war that is unending, in a war that is there to actually preserve the bourgeois democracy. So it is upon the world to actually look for an alternative, even if it's actually to escalate the Sudanese question to international criminal courts of justice. These are things that need to be discussed, and we need to silence the guns in Sudan, and so that people can get back their peace, and the masses are able to get back to their lives and bring the change that they so much looked forward to when the revolution was actually picking up. So for me, I feel this fight over territories and who wants to control this or that should be stopped, so that the Sudanese people are able to go back to their lives and continue to grow and be at par with other democracies as it should be. That's from me. Thank you.
Thank you. So having laid out some of these issues, what general comments might you have regarding them? Do you see all these issues as interconnected? Are there underlying factors in common in all of them? They're often used in the U.S. as they're brought up in relation to each other, but obviously, as we've laid out, there are some differences. But what do these ongoing questions mean for organizers in Kenya and Africa and across the world? What do you see as a way forward here?
Yes, thank you very much, comrades. Yes, indeed, I would say all these issues are interconnected. All these issues are interconnected. The question of Palestine, the question of Haiti, the question of Sudan, the question of the Congo are all interconnected. All these questions have one denominator. The denominator is settler colonialism. The denominator is the extraction of resources. The denominator is exploitation. The denominator is imperialism. Having looked at all these issues, we see that indeed the perpetrator of the oppression, of the exploitation, the perpetrator of all these problems that have arisen in all these areas that we have talked about is the same. You see? The imperialist exploiting the people of the Congo, the people of the Sudan, the people of Palestine, the people of Haiti, and the people of other places in the world is the same. It's monopoly capital. And of course, we know where monopoly capital is based, and we know what it does and what its interests are. We have the same international enemy, you see. Therefore, having realized this, the only way to deal with this common enemy, the only way to achieve liberation for the people of the world, or rather what this means for organizers in Africa and beyond, is that we must come together in a unified front, a unified anti-imperialist front, a unified anti-imperialist front that brings together movements and organizations, that recognizes and looks into the various struggles that are taking place in different parts of the world, and that puts these struggles at the fore, so that whatever campaigns are going on in Kenya, in South Africa, in Nigeria, are campaigns that people in India, in Brazil, in the US are also campaigning against or are campaigning for, you see? So that the struggles that are going on in one part of the world become struggles that concern other people in other parts of the world, and struggles that movements and organizations in other parts of the world adopt and agitate. You see, when we create this united front, what we achieve is not only a unification or the creation of fraternal relations between movements and organizations internationally, but we also achieve a unification of the people, because organizations that are rooted within the people then are able to articulate issues that the people themselves are articulating. So that if a movement that is embedded in popular organizing in one part of the world gets into contact and establishes relations and does common campaigns with a movement or organization that is doing the same in other parts of the world, then that means that we are bringing our people together, and that's the surest way in combating imperialism and in working towards the liberation of the whole world. So this is exactly what organizers in Africa, organizers in other parts of the world today should think about and should consider. That's what it means. And of course, this stemming from the conversation we've had today, this stemming from the realization that whatever is happening in the different parts of the world is actually interconnected, and that the perpetrator of the oppression and exploitation is in fact the same. Thank you.
you.